The hospital corridor fell silent, except for the rhythmic squeak of wheelchair wheels against polished linoleum. Sarah Mitchell stared at her daughter's legs, motionless beneath a thin hospital blanket, and felt her heart shatter for the 1,000th time. 8-year-old Emma had forgotten what running felt like. She'd forgotten the simple joy of jumping into a puddle or dancing in her bedroom. For 18 months, the brightest little girl Sarah had ever known had been trapped in a body that refused to cooperate. And every specialist, every renowned physician, every doctor with letters after their name had offered the same devastating prognosis. There was nothing more they could do. Sarah had spent her life savings, mortgaged her small house twice, and worked 3 jobs to afford consultations with the best neurologists money could buy. She'd taken Emma to Johns Hopkins Mayo Clinic, and even flew to a specialist in Boston whose waiting list was 2 years long. Each time the answer was the same. Emma's condition, a rare neurological disorder that had struck without warning after a seemingly ordinary virus, had baffled everyone. The inflammation had damaged nerves in ways medical textbooks hadn't fully documented. Surgery was too risky. The medications weren't working. Physical therapy had plateaued. Emma's bright blue eyes still sparkled with hope, but Sarah could see that hope dimming a little more each day. "Mommy, can we go to the park today?" Emma asked, her voice small but determined. "I want to feel the sun." Sarah's throat tightened. "Of course, sweetheart. We'll go this afternoon." They'd been living in a cramped apartment near Seattle Children's Hospital for the past 3 months, close enough for Emma's frequent appointments. Sarah had left behind everything familiar in their small Oregon hometown, desperate for answers that never came. The apartment was on the 3rd floor, and there was no elevator. Every day, Sarah carried her daughter down those stairs, then back up again, her arms aching, her back screaming but never complaining because Emma needed her to be strong. The park near their apartment had become their sanctuary. While other children ran and played, Emma would sit in her wheelchair under an old oak tree, making up stories about the clouds and teaching herself to draw with colored pencils Sarah had bought at a dollar store. Sarah would sit beside her, fighting back tears, wondering how life had become so impossibly hard. It was on one of these ordinary afternoons that their lives changed forever, though Sarah didn't know it yet. She was pushing Emma's wheelchair along the park's paved path when one of the wheels caught on a crack in the concrete. The chair lurched violently to the side, and before Sarah could react, it tipped over completely. Emma cried out as she tumbled onto the grass, and Sarah's scream pierced the peaceful afternoon air. "Emma! Oh God, Emma!" Sarah dropped to her knees, her hands shaking as she reached for her daughter. A crowd began to gather, concerned faces hovering above them. "I'm okay, Mommy," Emma whispered, though tears streamed down her cheeks. "I'm okay." But the wheelchair wasn't okay. The frame had bent, one wheel completely detached. Sarah stared at it in horror. That wheelchair had cost $4,000, money she'd scraped, together from a GoFundMe campaign and the generosity of strangers. Insurance had covered less than half. She didn't have money for repairs, let alone a replacement. "Here, let me help." A quiet voice cut through Sarah's panic. She looked up to see a man in his late 30s, wearing faded jeans and a flannel shirt with paint stains on the sleeves. His hands were calloused, his face kind but weathered. He knelt beside them with an ease that suggested he knew his way around emergencies. "I'm Marcus," he said gently. "I'm a carpenter, just finished a job across the street. Mind if I take a look at your chair?" Sarah nodded, unable to form words. She watched as this stranger examined the wheelchair with careful attention, his fingers tracing the bent metal, testing the broken wheel mount. He was quiet for a long moment, then looked up at Emma with a warm smile. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Emma," she replied shyly. "Well, Emma, I think I can fix this. But it's going to take a few days. I'll need to fabricate some parts in my workshop." He turned to Sarah. "I live just a few blocks from here. I could bring it back to you by the end of the week. No charge." Sarah felt tears spring to her eyes. "I can't ask you to do that. I can pay you something, just give me a few weeks." "You didn't ask." "I'm offering." Marcus's voice was firm but gentle. "And I don't want your money. Let me do this." For the next hour, Marcus sat with them in the park. He learned that Emma loved stories, that Sarah was a former elementary school teacher who'd given up her career to care for her daughter, that they were far from home and running out of hope. He told them about his own daughter, Lily, who was 9 and living with her grandparents in Montana while Marcus worked construction jobs to pay off medical debt from his late wife's cancer treatment. He understood struggle. He understood heartbreak. He understood the weight of loving someone with everything. You hadn't feeling powerless to help them. "I'll carry Emma home for you," Marcus said when the sun began to set. "It's not safe for you to try those stairs alone with her." Sarah wanted to protest, to maintain some shred of independence, but she was exhausted. She nodded gratefully. Marcus lifted Emma with such gentleness that the little girl giggled, something Sarah hadn't heard in weeks. He carried her up 3 flights of stairs without breaking a sweat, chatted with her about her drawings, and made her promise to create something special for him by the time. He brought the wheelchair back. True to his word, Marcus returned 5 days later with the wheelchair. But it wasn't just repaired. He'd completely rebuilt it. The frame was reinforced and lighter. The wheels were larger, better suited for rough terrain. He'd even added a small basket on the back and painted racing stripes on the sides because Emma had mentioned she liked purple. "Mr. Marcus!" Emma's face lit up like Christmas morning. "It's beautiful." "It's more than beautiful," Sarah whispered, running her hands over the smooth metalwork. "This must have taken you days." "The materials alone. Had most of them lying around," Marcus said with a shrug that Sarah suspected wasn't entirely truthful. "Besides, I enjoyed the project." But Marcus didn't stop there. He started visiting them regularly, always with some excuse. He'd bring groceries, claiming they were about to expire at the store where his buddy worked. He'd show up with books for Emma, saying someone had donated them to a community center. He helped Sarah navigate the complex world of disability resources she didn't know existed. He made phone calls on her behalf to charity, organizations, and medical equipment programs. One evening, 3 weeks after they'd met, Marcus arrived with unexpected news. "I was talking to my cousin," he said, settling into the worn chair at their small kitchen table. "He's not a doctor, but he's a physical therapist who worked with wounded veterans. He specializes in cases where conventional medicine hasn't worked. He owes me a favor, and I called it in. He's willing to evaluate Emma. No charge for the first month of sessions." Sarah felt her chest constrict. She'd been disappointed so many times before. "Marcus, I appreciate everything you've done, but Emma has seen so many specialists. Just meet with him. What do you have to lose?" The answer was nothing. She had nothing left to lose except the tiny flame of hope that still flickered in her chest, and she wasn't sure she could survive watching it extinguish again. Marcus's cousin James turned out to be nothing like the specialist Sarah had encountered. He didn't speak in complicated medical jargon or treat Emma like a fascinating case study. He sat on the floor with her, played games, asked about her drawings, and only after an hour of play did he begin his assessment. His approach was unconventional, combining physical therapy with neurological, retraining exercises that seemed more like games than treatment. "Her brain hasn't forgotten how to send signals," James explained to Sarah after the first session. "But the pathways are damaged, and the signals are taking wrong turns. We need to help her brain build new roads. It's going to take time, consistency, and work. But I've seen progress in cases like hers before." Marcus arranged his work schedule so he could drive them to Emma's. 3 times weekly appointments. He'd sit in the waiting room for hours working on his laptop, always ready with an encouraging smile when they emerged. He celebrated every tiny victory, Emma holding a pencil with more control, her toe twitching on command, her ankle rolling slightly to the left. Months passed. Marcus became part of their family in ways that felt both natural and miraculous. He taught Emma card tricks and helped with her homeschool lessons. He fixed everything in their apartment that was broken and made. Sarah laughed when she'd forgotten how. On hard days, when progress seemed impossible and Emma cried from exhaustion and frustration, Marcus would be there with his steady presence and unshakable belief that better days were coming. "Why are you doing all this?" Sarah asked him one night after Emma had fallen asleep. "You barely know us. You have your own life, your own struggles." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, staring at his coffee cup. "When my wife was dying," he finally said, "we had nothing. I was working 2 jobs and it still wasn't enough. One day, a stranger paid our electric bill anonymously. Another time, someone left groceries on our porch. A nurse spent her own time sitting with my wife so I could sleep. These people didn't know us, but they saw us struggling. And they helped. He looked up at Sarah with tears in his eyes. I couldn't save my wife, but maybe I can help save your daughter. Maybe that's enough. 8 months after the wheelchair accident in the park, Sarah stood in James's therapy room, her hands pressed against her mouth, unable to breathe. Emma was standing. Not leaning, not supported, but standing on her own 2 feet. Trembling with effort, but standing. James stood several feet away, arms outstretched, encouraging. Come to me, Emma, you can do it. Emma looked back at her mother, fear and determination warring on her small face. Sarah wanted to rush forward to catch her if she fell, but Marcus's hand on her shoulder held her back. Let her try, he whispered. Emma took 1 step, then another. Her legs shook violently, and she nearly fell, but she caught herself. A 3rd step, then a 4th. She was crying and laughing at the same time. And so was Sarah. 5 steps, 6. And then she was in James's arms, sobbing with joy and exhaustion. I did it. Mommy, I did it! I walked. Sarah collapsed to her knees, and Emma came to her, walking those precious few steps into her mother's embrace. They clung to each other, crying so hard that neither could speak. All the pain, all the fear, all the impossible nights and devastating days poured out in those tears. But they were tears of joy now, tears of victory, tears of gratitude for the miracle they'd stopped believing possible. Marcus knelt beside them, wrapping his arms around them both, and the 3 of them stayed there on the floor, holding on to each other in this perfect, impossible moment. Emma's recovery wasn't instantaneous or complete. She worked hard for months more, building strength and relearning movements most people took for granted. But she did learn. She did recover. And throughout it all, Marcus was there. The single dad with paint-stained shirts and calloused hands who'd given them something no billionaire doctor could provide: unwavering belief, selfless love, and the persistent hope that miracles happen through ordinary people doing extraordinary things. A year later, Sarah stood in that same park where their journey had begun, watching Emma run through the grass with other children, her laughter carrying on the wind. Marcus stood beside her, his hand in hers, no longer a stranger but family in every way that mattered. Thank you, Sarah whispered, though the words felt impossibly inadequate for everything he'd given them. You saved her life. Marcus squeezed her hand gently. We saved each other, he said simply, and in that moment Sarah knew he was right. Sometimes healing wasn't about expensive treatments or prestigious hospitals. Sometimes it was about one person seeing another person's pain and deciding that indifference wasn't an option. Sometimes miracles wore flannel shirts and had paint under their fingernails. Sometimes the greatest medicine was simply refusing to let someone suffer alone. Emma's joyful shout carried across the park. Watch me, Mom! Watch me run! And Sarah did watch, with tears of gratitude streaming down her face, holding the hand of the man who'd proven that the most powerful force in the universe wasn't money or medicine or expertise. It was love, offered freely by one imperfect human to another.